Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Girls, and Purrs. My name's Leslie, and elephant in the room, I continue to look crazy. I'm recording this the same day that I recorded my comic book confessions that came out like 2 days ago. Uh, I am handling this particular book discussion a little bit different. Hopefully, it won't be as long as I'm concerned this may be, but we'll see. The reason why I'm handling this a little bit different is I'm just going to say before I get started, I am going to be discussing the Bass Rock, and it is really in the context of my readathon that I have going on for Claudia. I have an interview the Vampire Inspired Readathon. Right now I'm focusing on Claudia. It's supposed to be about 2 months long. It's kind of running into 3. And so I'm reading the Bass Rock to fulfill a prompt. Claudia is suppressed by violence. Read a book discussing patriarchal structures. And so I picked the Bass Rock. But with that said, because of the prompt and the contents of the book, just make sure you look up the warnings for this book before you start listening to me mouth off about the details of the book. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Also, it's super hot, so I'm just gonna look crazy. There's no way around it. You're gonna see sweat coming down. I don't have my glasses on because that's how hot it is right now. My glasses are just gonna like slide off. My hair is crazy. Anyways, so all right, we got that out of the way. So if you look up the warnings and you feel comfortable discussing this book, we're gonna get into it. Okay. I am gonna have to have a little bit of a preamble, which is before I go into like book details. And I'll say this. The author, Evie Wyld, has written several other books. All the Birds Singing. I'm trying to think about what else. The Bass Rock is. Everything is Teeth. The Echoes. After the Fires. And a couple of other books. But this is the first time I'm reading the author's work. Evie Wyld is considered like an English author. They did have times when they were younger where they lived on Australia. And so I think that is kind of like reflected in her work. And she also has several Australian literary awards. Ultimately, I did watch a couple of interviews to discuss this book, and the author did say that the Bass Rock is really like a culmination of like all her other work, and where she was trying to go with her work, and she felt like she really like landed on the Bass Rock. And a big influence for the Bass Rock is that there is this journalist, Cheryl Lee Moody, who did research about about femicide, specifically in Australia. They created a database, and it's called AustralianFemicideWatch.org. And there's like a statistical, there's like a tally of how many women and children that have died due to violence. And so if that's something interested in that and that you want to look into, I'll make sure I put that in the details. But this was just something that heavily impacted the author's work, and specifically writing the Bass Rock. And so just to kind of go down the line of what I usually say for this is also the Bass Rock, the cover. I like this one. I usually don't comment on the comparing covers so much, but I like the cover work for this more than the UK version, which is a wild thing to say because it's usually the other way around. I'm constantly envious of the UK covers of so many other books that I think are done so much better than the American releases. But the UK release is just like a flower, as where I think this captures what the book is doing better than just having a flower on the cover. I'll just say that. All right. And also, I don't have my notes up on my screen like I usually do. All right. So this book is Gothic literature. I'm trying to think about where I should go from here. So let's talk a little bit about the synopsis. All right. So I'm going to read a little bit of the back of the book and then we'll kind of get into it. So surging out of the sea, the Bass Rock has always borne witness to the lives that pass under its shadow on the Scottish mainland. And across the centuries, the fates of three women are I can never say that, inextricably linked to this place and to one another. Sarah, accused of being a witch, is fleeing for her life. Ruth, in the aftermath of the Second World War, is navigating a new marriage and the strange waters of the local community. And 6 decades later, Viv, still mourning the death of her father, is cataloging Ruth's belongings in the now empty house. So each woman's story unfurls, and you really just see how the mechanisms of like patriarchy and male violence, male control, and societal norms, and like what's accepted, um, really like impacts each woman's lives and their narratives. I'm not going to quote a short quote like I usually do. I think it's best to open with page 1 and 2 of the book. Um, the way that the author handles this, like although we are following these three women and their like intricate stories, and the world is like really well built. All the characters are very much like lived in, um, and I love the way the dialogue is written. Where am I getting at? The beginning and the ending are like bookends in a way, and so they don't specifically necessarily relate to the stories, but they do thematically. And so I thought that was a really beautiful way to like open and close um, the book with everything the author's saying with this. Um, Also, this it's graphic, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and read this. I was 6, and just the two of us, my mom and I, took Bowie for a walk along the beach where she and Dad grew up. The shore, a mix of black rock and pale, cold sand. It was always cold, even in summer. We wore wool jumpers, and our noses ran and became scorched with wiping on our sleeves. But this was November, and the wind made the dog walk close to us. Her ears flat, her eyes squinted. I could see the top layer of sand skittering away, so that it looked like a giant bed sheet billowing. We were looking for cowrie shells among the debris of the tide line. I had 2 digging into my palm, white like the throat of a herring gull. My mother had a keener eye and held 6. I felt the pull of victory slacking. Resting in a rock pool was a black suitcase. Bulging at the sides, the zip had slipped, and where the teeth no longer held together, I saw 2 fingers tipped with red nails and 1 gray knuckle where a third finger should have been. The stump of the finger, like the miniature plaster ham I had from my doll's house. The color had been sucked from the knuckle by seawater, leaving just a cool gray and the white of the bone. It was the bone, I suppose, that made it so much like the tiny ham. I moved my arm to swat something away from my face, and as I did, flies rose from the suitcase in a cloud, thick and heavy. Behind me, my mother, "Another one," she called. "I found another one." And then the smell like a dead cat in the chimney in a summer, a smell so tall and so broad that you can't see over or around it. My mother walked up behind me. "What's dot dot dot?" I kept looking at the finger and trying to understand. My mother pulling me by my arm. Come away," she said, and spitting over and over on the sand. "Don't look, come away." But the more I looked, the more I saw, and peeking through the gaps between the white fingers was an eye that seemed to look back at me. that seemed to know something about me and to ask a question and gave me an answer. In my memory, which is a child's memory and unreliable, the eye blinks. And so that's just the opening of the book. So it really sets the tone for what we're going to be getting into. It's very descriptive, it's very graphic, and also of the consequence of violence taking place, right? And there's definitely like that sense of here goes my cats, gothic literature. There's death in this book. There's also a ghost, and it's not like one of these things where we're not sure if the ghost exists or not in a narrative. This is, in fact, a ghost. Um, there's a creepy setting that gets told. It's Ginger. She's, come on. Let's see if she comes up here. And the women in this book are under distress, quite a bit of distress, and they're really burdened by their own like male protagonists throughout the story, and so that really even the atmosphere of it, there's like so much tension, or like you feel like on edge, you don't know what's going to happen next when there are threats amidst, and that also really stood out for me as far as like the author digging into like the brutal world and brutal violence that are thrust upon women, but written in a way that I think is best suited under Gothic literature. So I really like that she wrote that, and I felt like that really works well, coincidentally, for reading a readathon that focuses on Interview the Vampire, which is Gothic literature as well. You can't see it, but Ginger's now on the floor. Maybe you hear her whistling breath. Let me see. Something that really stood out to me. Oh, I'm trying to think about what I should talk about. I don't want to get too much into spoilers. Um, so the book is called, yes, The Bass Rock. And no matter what timeline we're in, all these women in their life, the Bass Rock is there. Just like I said, ghost uh, just exists, just like a witch exists. These are treated as facts. And I think that's like also symbolically important to the story, because the Bass Rock is just as constant as the violence that uh, has not diminished, has not disappeared, and is just pervasive, right? And that's what the author is trying to capture. Or at least that's what my takeaway was with the Bass Rock, is that no matter what timeline we're in, Bass Rock exists. No matter what timeline we're in, violence against women exists. So that was kind of like my takeaway. What I also really liked was that there's this constant conversation through these different storylines that included animals. For instance, one character, I think it was Viv, like happens to mention to another character that she's dating someone, and this person, Maggie, asks her like, what kind of man are you dating? Is this a oh, how did she say it? She said it like, is this a wolf? But she gave options. She was like, is this a wolf man? Basically, I feel like the author brings in animal figures to talk about how men can take on this like predatory behavior. Um, and so that goes on throughout, where people are referenced as a particular animal. Um, and that also, to go off on a tangent, should I? That reminds me of a song that is very much about the same subject matter by Jensen McRae. Um, she wrote a song called Wolves, and it's very much about like violence against women and their experience, and unfortunately like the cultural zeitgeist of like violence, and that just felt very I don't know, I guess in line with what the author was doing here with breaking up like animal representation in the books. I'm trying to think if I should give examples. I don't want to make this too long, but I'm just trying to think about things that stood out to me. There is something that not just about the animals that are like thematic, or that are like constantly going on throughout the different narratives. There's also something that echoes through all these different timelines that the author did. But the author also discusses why they use this particular device in an interview, so I will be including that below in the details. Um, and it's really talking about when someone really crosses the line of consent. And so, in one instance, in like let's say present day, a character will say like, "I don't like being tickled," and yet their male partner will tickle them in a way that feels aggressive, uncomfortable, and in turn, when all is said and done, her male partner will say like, "Well, actually, you saying no is actually an invitation for me to do this," and um, that is echoed again in a different timeline where a woman is kind of brought into this game that she's unaware is even going on, and it has to do with a group of men tickling women, and it's written in such a haunting way, and the only way someone could do stylistically with Gothic literature, with having that kind of skill set that could make the situation feel very scary, and then it goes through another timeline as well, and yes, there is also like I keep saying, quite a bit of violence against women. But I think that what the author does with this like crossing of consent and using tickling as a way to discuss this, I feel like as a literary device, is it's like mirroring or paralleling a conversation about um, different forms of violence against women by like a male counterpart. And it's the idea that, well, if I didn't see it, it didn't happen. Or I'm talking about like other people, not just like the two people involved with the violence, but also well, maybe the violence isn't that bad. Maybe the abuse isn't that bad. It's always about diminishing and gaslighting versus any type of like accountability. And we also see like socially um, what is accepted from a male's behavior throughout different ages of characters' lives or different characters versus what a woman is just expected to deal with and accept. And that really stuck out to me. So, yeah, there's definitely that kind of like it's not that bad mentality. There's quite a bit of gaslighting. But again, I just thought that was so effective to use tickling because it's something that's like so vulnerable and being at the whim of somebody else, if that makes any sense. There goes Ginger. She meowed to get in, and now she's meowing to get out. Um, what else? I'll read page 254 just to kind of like give you an example of like the tickling scenario that I thought was like really effective. And it's from page 254. And so it's just like one paragraph. He narrows one eye. You're angry. I tickled you? He sounds so very confused. I feel so stupid. Sorry, did I miss something? I told you I hate being tickled. Yeah, but so does everyone. And anyway, you knew the moment you said that, you knew that you were going to get tickled. That's how it works. It's an invitation. And so that's how like the interaction goes on, is that she's clearly saying something bothered her and that this person crossed a line, but it's just so, to him it seems so ridiculous, even though that it's just like the cold facts of like crossing the lines of consent. My cat, I could tell her that she wants to jump in here. Um, so that stood out to me as like a really effective way to talk about like just as much as the Bass Rock is an example of something like constant, um, unmoving and progress. It just exists. Um, so is the constant of the tickling, right? There's different scenarios and there's different variations of how a person might read and feel like how extreme these and raw and like violating these experiences are. And I appreciated using the author using that um, more than repeatedly using violence against women as a device. Like that's also there, but there's like a variation here to get a message across. And I thought that was like really important, rather than writing something that might come off as like exploitive in a way. It's like it's a very fine line, and I hate the way that this author handled this. Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to discuss because Ginger's been just distracting me this whole time. um, I need to move along to the 3 questions for Claudia. Let's see. Why is this book on Claudia's bookshelf? Oh, there's so many examples. Here she is. I think for Claudia, she had like this horrific experience with Bruce that she ran into. And I think this book really taps into like uh, the feeling of like a loss of control, and also feeling like a little bit like the world is like the Twilight Zone because no one's really like on her side, and that's reflected in society. At least for the first 2 seasons that we've seen of her story and the way that like Lestat reacted on the train. It was just like really cruel. Um, and like there's no like support system. She's just carrying all this trauma around and it's just like really vulnerable, on top of kind of being treated like, okay, well, there's no checking in on her. I don't know, that just kind of stuck out to me. um, so yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that it's on her shelf, and especially since what her and Madeline go through. um, did this book recontextualize the character for me? Maybe not so much, not so much. um, I think that unfortunately, like we see the strength of Claudia, but we shouldn't have to see what she went through as something that makes her stronger, which is something I really push up against. Because women shouldn't have to feel like being violated is a rite of passage in order to get on the other side of like earning strength. That just should not be a thing. And we see that in narratives kind of time and time again, and it's definitely been a discussion with Interview the Vampire and how Claudia's character is handled. But I also think, there goes Ginger. I also think that this has been added to her character versus what happens in the book, because they're trying to show like a cycle of violence and a cycle of trauma. And when trauma goes unchecked, not really checked in, that um, that cycle is just like bound to repeat itself. And so that's basically what happens. That's basically what happens with Claudia. And also we will see in next season, season 3, how that cycle gets passed down from like parent to child. And okay, be nice. That's kind of mean. She's using her claws. What book would I recommend Claudia? I just realized I didn't grab another one for her for this one. What do I have on my shelf? I have something. I want to offer up another cozy read. So hold on. Oh my God. Here we go. The giant stack of books. This book I've been trying to get to read, so I haven't read it yet, but it's been sitting here collecting dust on my shelf. I will recommend Claudia, The Candle Shop of Wick and Whimsy, just because of the title alone. It's by Andrea J. Severson. It's part of the Independent Hearts book. This is book number 3. This author has a YouTube channel, and I really enjoy their vlog style. They also are a professor at a college. And so, yeah, they put out these cozy reads, and I follow them on Instagram. And I'm just so into everything they're doing. And by the way, I think I've talked about this before, but if you get their books, she has like lined them up so you could actually, like, when you set them up beside each other, like you could tell which bookshop is like across the street, which one is at the end of the block, like that kind of thing. I thought that was like a really cute attention to detail. And it says, it's business as usual at Morgan Candle Company, and Elise couldn't be happier or more excited for the year ahead. But when an unexpected opportunity falls into her lap that could drastically change her business, she can't say no. Adding to complications, a blast from the past blows in a town, and an old love is reignited. Can an old flame be lit again, or will it end in disaster? With the clock ticking on both her business and her love life, Elise feels the pressure rise, and decisions must be made. She'd been willing to compromise in the past, but that's not an option now. Her life has been flipped upside down and then flipped again, and nothing feels the same. But is her new life what she wants? And I also like that idea of this book because Madeline had her own shop. I think it would be kind of cute if Claudia picked this up and kind of was thinking about her relationship with Madeline. Sorry, did I say Madeline? I think I said Claudia. I mean Madeline. And with that said, Ginger is thoroughly unimpressed. I hope I did this book some sort of justice. Again, I'm going to link in the details a conversation with the author, as well as the database that was created by the journalist, because I felt like it's an important work. And so, yes, if you've stuck around and you've read a book for this readathon, please feel free to share and let me know which book that you read. Ginger. I have 2 more books to read, right? Yes, I have 2 more books to read. And so hopefully I have those out on schedule because I can be any more behind than I already am. Thank you for everyone for entertaining me in this Into the Vampire Inspired Readathon. If you decide to read something else, let me know. Let me know where you're at in the readathon yourself if you're fulfilling another prompt. And just remember, life is chaos, so be kind to yourself and read more books. Bye.